public record. We are going to be asking you some questions this evening, and we will want you to participate so we can capture some qualitative and quantitative data. There's a Mentimeter poll that will show up in the corner. You can go to mentimeter.com and put in the code. The code has moved from the screen. There it is. And the code is 22111756. You can go to menti.com, or you can take your device and use the QR code to go to Menti. So we're going to have a brief icebreaker to get the evening started, and then we'll hear from our good friend, Nick Johnson. But the first thing that we wanted to ask you is, what do you like best about DC in the springtime? So what do you like best about DC in the springtime? And if you can go to that menti.com site and put in the site what you like best about the springtime, we'll see some of your answers come up on the screen in just a second. So what do you like best about this DC in the springtime? I like the cherry blossoms myself, and the beautiful weather that we're anticipating. If we can get out of the 50-degree time zone, it would be great for that. So biking is one of the big things that came up for like the best in the springtime. See if anybody else has the opportunity. As others are coming into the call, we're just doing a brief icebreaker. You can use the menti.com code 22111756. Flowers, yeah. And you can tell us your answer to what do you like best about DC in the springtime. Gardening. This is getting us all adjusted to the Mentimeter because we're going to be asking questions throughout the evening, and we want you to be able to engage in that way. So biking, gardening, flowers. I like the cherry blossoms and the tidal basin. So with that, we'll go to the next slide. This is our agenda for the evening. Welcome. We'll have a welcome statement from potentially some of the members of the commission if they're on this evening. We'll give you a purpose for the rationale for this call and the purpose for having these public engagements. We'll give you some background on why taxes and what taxes do for us as citizens within the Washington, D.C. Space. We'll talk about the D.C. Tax Revision Commission and how it got started and what its commitment to you as citizens is. And then we'll have some discussion where you can ask questions as well as go over what the next steps for the commission are this year. Now, you're welcome to raise your hand throughout the conversation, and we will try to get to you as soon as possible, or you can place your comments or your question into the chat. And upon placing your comments into the chat, we will address your comments as soon as we can. I understand there's a way to add closed captions. We can't close captions, but this will be recorded, and we'll see if the recording could possibly have some transcript with it. Thank you for that question. And so we will give the purpose statement tonight. And the purpose of our conversation is to provide DC residents with an opportunity to offer your thoughts and your feedback on the DC tax system that is before the DC Tax Revision Commission, or TRC, as we may call it, throughout the evening. And they will be reviewing your feedback, and then they will be putting together those recommendations and providing those recommendations to the DC Council as well as the mayor on possible policy changes that will impact the DC tax system. So we're gathering feedback from stakeholders, and you as citizens are stakeholders that we want to hear from. So with that, we'll go to the next slide. So as stated a bit earlier, but I'll go over those again, there's some participation norms. We want everyone to be obviously respectful and kind in this engagement. If you have a question, use the raise the hand button via Zoom, or if you're calling on your device, you can do *9 on your telephone to speak. Please limit your statement or question to 1 minute. If we can't answer the question right now, we will document that question and try and ensure that our FAQs or information on the site that's listed below will have answers at a later time. You can raise your questions again or your comments in the chat, and you may also contribute your thoughts now or later by uploading them to the DC Tax Revision Commission.org website. Next slide. And so another little Menti poke so we can see who we're actually engaging with this evening. So very quickly, which ward are you from, or where do you hail from in the district. So we have Ward 7 is represented this evening. I myself am from Ward 4. I'm a Ward 4 resident. I have also lived in Ward 5. I've also lived in Ward 2. So Ward 6. Give another second to see if any others. Ward 3. Okay. Well, we are very happy that we have a cross-section, at least in the numbers we have, a couple of folks from across the ward, Ward 2, right? It looks like right now we have a pretty broad cross-section of folks who will be in the call tonight. Ward 5, oh, could we possibly get every ward tonight? That would be excellent if we did. Still waiting. I'll hold out for another second or so. All right. Well, we got 5 out of 8, so that's excellent. And we may have some of those hiding in the back who will be undisclosed this evening. So with that, we'll go to the next slide. So I'll pass it to my good friend, Nick Johnson, who will talk about why taxes. Nick, over to you.
Thanks so much, Ray. Can everybody hear me? Can you hear me okay, Ray? All right. Well, I'm really grateful for the chance to be with everybody tonight. I know our chair, Tony Williams, is going to be joining shortly, and I'll let him have a few words when he gets on. But I want to start by saying a few words about why I think taxes are really important. So I'm Nick Johnson. I'm the director of the Tax Revision Commission, so I'm staff to the commission. And I'll share with you something that I really like about springtime in DC, or any season, which is this bridge you see right here. This is the new Frederick Douglass Bridge course, not far from where I live in Ward 6. And what's interesting to me about it is that our country has a habit of taking our bridges for granted. Far too often we build them ugly and then we let them crumble. But we also know that bridges are critical infrastructure, and we take them for granted at our peril. So for us to function as a community, we need our bridges to be safe and functional and serve everyone in the community. And this bridge happens to do a fantastic job of that. 77,000 vehicles per day, safe and wide sidewalks for pedestrians and cycles, connects to critical parts of the city that we all know need stronger connections, and because it's named for Frederick Douglass, it reminds us of our shared heritage. And what's interesting is that planning and designing this bridge took a lot of time and a lot of care, and it involved the whole community. And as with bridges, so with a tax system, or really any public system, as citizens, we're smart not to take them for granted, and we're smart not to leave them to other people to make decisions. If we want a tax system to serve our interests, we have to pay attention, get educated, and participate. And so that's why we're here tonight. Like a bridge, I believe a tax system can be something that brings us together. What the tax system does to help the city thrive, first and foremost, is to pay for services. Now, I took the mayor's budget document, broke it down a little bit to remind us all the many ways that the tax system touches our lives and the life of the city through the services it funds. So I've got the data from the mayor's budget. I've broken it down into sort of 5 big categories of spending, just to give a sense of how our local funds are used. And this is local dollars. This is the money we raise ourselves locally, not the money we get from the federal government, although that's important too. The single biggest area of spending in our budget, 27% of local funds, is education. Public schools, libraries, parks, DC's support to the University District of Columbia. A second big area of support, 22% of local funds, that's health and human services. About a third of DC residents get their health care at least partly funded by the district. A third area of spending is public safety, police, fire, paramedics, corrections. About a quarter of our local dollars goes to operating our roads, metro, other public works, plus just the cost of building and financing our physical infrastructure, the public places and spaces that make the district physically what it is. And the final bucket of funding that I'm showing here is sort of the cost of running the whole thing: economic development, regulation, housing, plus things like actually operating the tax system, having staff over at OTR to help us navigate the tax system. All that said, a lot of people, I think, would agree it's not enough just to have a tax system that raises money. We need to do it in a way that's fair, transparent, and good for our people and for our economy. So I'm going to start. I want to give us a little bit of basics about the tax system, make sure we're all grounded. Now, here in DC, we pay taxes to two jurisdictions. We pay to the federal government and to the district government. That may seem obvious, but it's different than in other places you might have lived in your life or visited. If you lived in some of our suburbs, you pay city taxes, you pay county taxes, you pay school taxes, you pay state taxes. Here, it's just federal taxes, and then it's the district. So what are our taxes? Well, we got our property taxes. Homeowners, landlords, the owners of commercial buildings all pay an annual tax based on the value of the property they own. Now, of course, the federal government and some nonprofits don't pay property taxes, but it's still a major revenue source for the district. Income taxes. This includes individual income taxes that are on, salaries, wages, what you pay on your paycheck, and other forms of income. But it also includes the taxes that corporations and some other businesses pay on their incomes. We've got sales and excise taxes. This includes the 6% general sales tax. It also includes restaurant taxes, alcohol, cigarette, motor vehicles, all the other taxes on consumption, on purchases of goods and services. And then we've got a whole slew of other smaller revenue sources that sometimes they're labeled taxes, sometimes they're not. Fees for city services, fines for traffic and other violations, the lottery, and so on. So this is the sort of the bucket of local revenues, and this is what we're tasked with looking at, that whole slice of that whole pie. A lot of economists look at the DC tax system, think it's a pretty well-rounded system. Some other jurisdictions are actually missing some of these revenue sources entirely. So we've got a pretty good, well-rounded system, well-balanced system, but there are some challenges. And I want to share a few that I see and that have come up in the course of working in the Tax Revision Commission. But then I'm going to ask you what you're seeing. One challenge is that this changing economy we're in is affecting the revenues that come into the district. We recently got a new revenue forecast for the Office of the Chief Financial Officer, and they said we're going to get less revenues in than was previously expected. And this has to do with the aftermath of the pandemic, the fact that people aren't coming into the office quite as much. So commercial rents are down. So we're expecting less revenue from commercial property taxes and some other factors. So we've got some fiscal challenges ahead. Now, another challenge with our tax system is that some of our taxes hit hardest at those with least ability to pay. All those sales taxes and consumption taxes I mentioned, the fines, the fees, and to a large degree, the property taxes on residents too. Those can take a bigger percentage of the incomes of the poor and middle class than of the wealthiest. We've got some tax breaks in the system that people don't always know about, and sometimes have very limited benefits, but can be kind of costly. We've got the basic challenge that federal law prevents the district from taxing the incomes of Maryland and Virginia commuters as they come into the city to work, even if they depend on city services. We've got economic competition from our neighbors in Maryland and Virginia. Neighboring jurisdictions all across the country always compete economically. We're no exception there. There are deeply rooted inequities in our tax system. And these reflect and sometimes amplify inequities in our economy and our society as a whole. Even when the tax system didn't cause these inequities, it may yet reflect them. And finally, our tax system can be complicated and hard to deal with. I'll say no more about that, but I expect there's some in this group who have had some challenges as they've tried to pay their taxes and follow the rules. So these are some of the challenges that we've identified in our work. But I want to flip it back to you for a moment. What are the challenges that you see? Take a moment to go back to the Mentimeter and type in a few of something that you're seeing that's a challenge. Or I like to see the flip side of a challenge is an opportunity to do things better. We'll be having more of a conversation about this in a few minutes, but just off the cuff, what's something you see? And while you're doing that, I happen to notice that Mayor Williams has joined us. You want to jump on and say a few words?
Everybody, welcome to the hearing. This hearing is very important to us. One, because we want you actively engaged. We've gone beyond the, sign your name up and then speak for 3 minutes, and then, just a cavalcade of people just kind of giving speeches that no one listens to. we really want everybody actively involved. And two, we really want to use this as a teaching moment. So we're really proud to have you involved and look forward to having you continually engage as we move through the process. So this also isn't a one-step thing. We want to circulate our work, get your comments on it as we move forward. Thank you all.
Great. Thanks so much, Mayor Williams. We've got a few comments in the Mentimeter. I noticed Michael Pan in the chat entered. I think this was your response to the question, right? Virginia, a challenge across our neighbor right across the river. Low residential property taxes, causing escrow shortages as the taxes go up. Your mortgage payment may go up. The complexity for small businesses, for startup businesses, income tax rates very high, and a question about whether we're getting what we're paying for as crime increases. Yeah, so these are some of the things that I really appreciate you sharing these, and we'll get more into all of this as we go forward. So let me say, yeah, please keep entering in here. We are. I'm going to flip to the next slide, but the Mentimeter is going to capture all of these ideas, helping those who may be impacted as services are cut in the face of fiscal challenges. Yeah. So to address these challenges that I described, that you've described, and others, the district has something that's actually kind of unusual compared to other jurisdictions. Some other jurisdictions have this, but no one does this quite the way we do. We've got this tax revision commission, and the job of the commission, as established in statute, is to make recommendations to the mayor and council as to how our tax system can be better. I'm not going to read you this. This is from the part of the code that actually established the commission, but just at a glance, you can see it echoes some of the concerns I described a moment ago. The commission, of course, is more than just a section of the code. It's a group of people. So Mayor Williams, you just heard from, several others on the commission are with us this evening, and they'll have a chance to jump into the conversation as we go forward. As a commission, we have established 4 broad policy goals to reflect the council's charge. And these are the goals. And again, kind of reflecting the challenges I said a minute ago. Number 1, we're aiming to create a broader, resilient tax base for a post-COVID economy in order to protect against economic shifts and shocks, and to ensure future funding for high-quality public services and share tax burdens fairly across the community. Number 2, progressivity and racial equity, to eliminate racial disparities, protect low-income residents, and lift up our middle class. Number 3, economic efficiency and competitiveness, to advance growth and prosperity for all residents. And number 4, simple, open, fair administrative processes to reduce compliance burdens for residents and businesses. So I'm curious, what do you think of those goals? They're all important, right? But I'm going to put you on the spot for a minute. What strikes you as the most important goal? Mentimeter has given you a chance to rank them. Progressivity and racial equity, economic efficiency, competitiveness, broader tax base. Yeah, they're all important.
We may need to give people access to the survey again, or just repeat how they get in there.
Yep. So go to www.menti.com. You see it at the top of the screen, and enter in that code up at the top. 22111756. Thanks, Erica. So I'm going to keep going, but again, we are capturing all your responses as we go. The other thing we did as a commission, the commission adopted 3 key strategies for how we're doing this work that relates to what we're talking about today. So one of our key strategies is to follow the data, ensure that our recommendations are based on sound research. So we're having a series of briefings from experts, commissioning some outside research to make sure that the policy decisions we're recommending are sound. 2, relevant to tonight, engaging with people across the district, listening to a diversity of ideas and perspectives. And the 3rd is that we're really trying to work together collaboratively. The commission includes folks with a range of perspectives, and we're trying to develop consensus support for bold and thoughtful recommendations. The commission started meeting last fall and had a series of briefings. We've heard ideas put forward on changes to the tax system. We've looked across all the types of tax, income tax, property taxes, business taxes that might achieve our principles. I'm going to name just 5 examples of the ideas we've heard, not because they're the most important or because we've made any decisions, which we haven't, but because they provide examples of the kinds of ideas we're thinking about. So one is broadening the tax base, taxing a wider range of economic activity by enacting a new kind of tax called a business activity tax, potentially using that revenue in a variety of ways. Another example of an idea that's come up is expanding or consolidating property tax relief programs. The idea here is to address the fact that rising housing costs have led to high property taxes that can be really unaffordable for some people. And we've got a number of programs here, but are they working as effectively as they could be? A 3rd idea that's come up is adding a child tax credit to the income tax. The federal government has had a child tax credit, which really helped some families make ends meet. Could the district do something like that? The 4th idea I'll mention is wealth taxes or racial equity. We had a whole commission meeting on the topic of racial equity, and we were really reminded about how centuries of unequal treatment of Black people and white people has led to a deep racial wealth gap. And so using wealth taxes to try to address that. And a 5th idea is making more use of tax abatements and tax credits for economic development. I'm going to wrap up in just a minute. I want to leave you with a final point. The last time that DC had a tax revision commission, a decade ago, that commission put forward a set of recommendations. A majority of their recommendations were eventually adopted into law, and the effect was to reduce taxes on poor and middle income residents, make our business taxes more competitive with Maryland and Virginia, and get rid of some tax breaks that didn't make sense anymore.
Nick?
Whether you think those ideas are sound or not, the commission 10 years ago had an impact. This work matters. And so your input today matters as well. So I'm going to leave with that. Thank you for being here, and I'm going to turn it back over to Ray.
Thank you, Nick. I do think we had 2 questions. CM McIntosh, I saw that your hand was raised, and then Mr. Pan, I saw that your hand was raised as well. So we'll go first to CM McIntosh to see if they have a question. Oh, will the slides be available? Is that your only question?
Yes, that is my.
Yes, the presentation is being recorded and it will be on the site, the DC Tax Revision Commission.org site for people to see after the presentation is over. So the slides will be embedded within the presentation to be reviewed. Yes, ma'am.
And we'll upload the slides as well.
Oh, and the slides will be uploaded there as well. And other information is on the site as well. I'll get to your question, Ms. Limmer, in just 1 second. Mr. Pan, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I have a hand up. So regarding, yes, 2 questions.
Mhm.
Regarding the wealth tax for racial equity, what would it look like? Would it be like a cash reparations for Black Americans, descendants of slavery? Because Black people built DC from bottom to top. After 400 years, they built the White House. They built Congress. They built the federal government. But at the same time, DC is being gentrified. It's pushing a lot of Black people out, and it's moving in more white people or non-Black people in DC. So how's that going to change? And 2, you said about being competitive with Maryland, Virginia for business tax. Are we talking about business tax for smaller businesses or big corporations? You said the tax is competitive for big business is not going to work. it needs to be higher taxes on big corporations because Black people, again, build corporations. Corporations do not treat Black people fairly. So I would say a tax break for smaller businesses, but no tax breaks for big businesses because big businesses have cheated people to this very day. They're slaughter. They're fear-mongering people. They destroy everybody. They are oppressors. I cannot accept a competitive tax you guys are proposing because that does nothing to tackle income inequality, wealth inequality, and to also factor in that we need to factor in property taxes, this is that. Why not just learn from Scandinavian countries how they got their tax systems correct and well functioning? Because I'll guarantee you this would have ended wealth, income, and racial inequality immediately. But we're choosing not to because of the elected officials who don't have the political will to do it. They can if they want to, but they're choosing not to. So it's
Thank
not
you.
a question about making it competitive. The question is, are we investing in our people for tomorrow? Because if we don't invest in people tomorrow, we're not going to go any further and we're going to fall behind and behind. And more people are not just only leaving DC, but they're leaving America in higher numbers because they're tired of waiting for progress. If progress is not going to be done, then what's the point of fighting for?
Thank you, Mr. Pan, for your comments. We are recording those comments. And I also offer to you to put your statement down at the taxrevisioncommission.org. There's a site where you can leave a full comment and potentially some links to some of the references that you made in your comment. Would be great for the commission to review. So thank you so much for your comment, sir. Ms. Limmer, would you like to ask your question? I can say, Ms. Limmer's question is somewhat similar. How would a wealth tax work? I don't think that there is a policy out on the wealth tax at this point in time. I don't know if anyone from the TRC would like to comment on discussions that have been had or ideas that have been generated.
Yeah, I'll just say I probably should have made this a little clearer when I started talking. You know, the commission is at the point in our process where we have not made any decisions about how to go forward or even sort of what falls into what are the prime candidates for how something might work or not work. We've heard a lot of ideas, and I'll throw out a couple of possibilities that I've come across and I've heard about as we've been meeting with various groups. So one idea is to have higher taxes on very high value real estate. So for instance, properties that are worth a very large amount of money might pay property taxes at a somewhat higher rate. Another idea that is out there is to do more to tax financial wealth or the income that accrues from financial wealth, for instance, capital gains. A lot of times when the federal government provides quite preferential treatment to the income that is returned on capital, and some of our speakers and folks we've heard from have suggested, well, maybe the district should be more aggressive in taxing capital gains. But again, those are I mentioned those as sort of structural ways that one could do it, not to indicate that we've endorsed everything. And I just want to appreciate Michael Pan for speaking up and sharing his perspective on what we ought to be doing, because that's the kind of input that I think we find useful.
Thank you, Nick. I want to go to Mr. Ozan. I hope I'm saying your name correctly. I know you were looking to figure out how to raise your hand, but do you have a question, sir?
I do. Well, actually, I have two suggestions.
Yes, sir.
One, so my son and I are starting a small business. I'm the owner, he's the employee. I wish there was an exemption for filing the personal property tax for a business. You don't have to pay a tax unless you have $225,000 of assessed value property. We have like under 13,000, and we have to file that form, and it's very complicated. And every year we don't owe any tax. I think an exemption would be a great benefit for us that are struggling to get going. My other suggestion would be to raise the current exemption on the unincorporated business franchise tax. Now, if you have $12,000 of gross revenue, you have to file this form. It's 6 pages long and asks a lot of details, more stuff than the federal government requires you apply. And we did it this year. We just had enough money to do it. We had $1,000 of profit. We had to pay a $250 minimum tax. That's 25% of our profit. To me, that's pretty stiff for a business starting up. If you raise the exemption level, gross revenue at 12,000, maybe raise it up to 50,000 or something, so that the business would actually have a substantial amount of profit to pay a tax on. And the other part about that minimum tax is that the Department of Consumer and Regulatory Affairs charges us small businesses getting started. We have to pay $300 every other year just to register, and $50 a year for a license. So if you add that plus the $250 minimum tax, it's a lot for a small business getting started. I just would mention that I did submit a statement explaining my suggestions in a little more detail, but those are my suggestions.
Thank you so much for your contribution. And we know that one of the Tax Revision Commission's commitments, or as we talked earlier, is about administrative issues. And many of the items that you outlined are administrative burdens to some extent, possibly, as I wrote them down, and they are associated with small business. So we're capturing that information. Thank you, Mr. Odom. There's a question. There's a and it is from Carolyn Arpin. And her question or comment is there not a concern that both a business activity tax and wealth taxes would drive significant contributors to the tax base, individuals and businesses, out of DC? So I wonder if anyone would speak to the fact that this additional taxes on businesses and major businesses could also drive that tax base out of DC. That may be something that the tax revision has to consider too, as it looks at possible policy recommendation.
Yeah, I just want to appreciate that comment, and I think it's fair to characterize our discussions at the commission as being very, very much attentive to that concern. And what we're really, following our principle of trying to, follow the data and follow the research. We're trying to make sure we understand what the data is telling us about the extent to which that is really happening. And I think we're teeing up some research to look at the very latest data on the extent to which that's happening. One of the interesting things on that issue is that, of course, mobility may be changing. We're in this new this new post-COVID world where some kinds of we all are more fluent in Zoom for meetings like this one. So there certainly is concern that workers and businesses may be more mobile. And at the same time, we want to be responsive to what's actually happening and not, not concerns about what might happen. So just wanted to say that's something that's very much on our mind, and we're trying to look very carefully at the data.
So we'll go to a hand raise, and then we'll go back to the chat in just a second. So Selvin and Mr. and Mrs. Selvin, I don't want to say your last name incorrectly.
Bhuminathan.
Bhuminathan, thank you.
No problem.
Your question.
Yeah, so I think someone was raising the point of racial equity, and I think that's a very, very important point. But another person was also raising the point about administrative burden from for new businesses, small businesses, and also tax burden. And I think the two go together, because a lot of minorities and people of color want to start new businesses. And if you have too high of a tax on them, it is very difficult for them to do that. And then that affects their ability to generate wealth and keep wealth within their family. So it all kind of works together. And my thought was, rather than having our graduated tax rates the way they are, and then having these very complicated provisions that give relief for specific targeted things, wouldn't it be more efficient to just say, you know what, everyone who makes $50,000 or less, you don't get tax at all, 0% tax rate, and then graduate from there, but at the same time drastically reduce all of the credits and this credit, that credit, all these things and forms that we have to fill out to then get a benefit. Rather than doing that, it would be more efficient and more equal and fair if you just said, you know, have very specific tax rates and have the exemptions much higher, but then maybe graduate the rates at the higher levels.
Thank you for your feedback, sir. I'm going through the chat. Mr. Pan, I'll get to you in just a second to make sure I didn't miss anyone. For the one message from Carla M. Lewis is, please restore the pension benefit for seniors, exempt pensions from being taxed for people over 65 is a comment she wanted to make sure the TRC heard. And one from Mr. Shapiro, then I'll go to Mr. Pan again. Is it possible to get clarification on the biennial fees businesses are required to pay, why they exist, and why smaller and startup businesses are required to pay them? I don't know if we have anybody with a background on the fees that are associated with starting up a small business on tonight. But if not, some of that information may be available at the taxrevisioncommission.org site, or we can ensure that we have some information there to talk or direct people to the fees for small businesses. Mr.
Oh, yes, I just want to bring attention when someone's questioning about the wealth tax, would result in double taxation, and I don't think we have a clear understanding what a wealth tax looks like. I'll just give an example what a wealth tax looks like according to Bernie Sanders when he ran in 2016, 2020, and I think it's very important we understand. A lot of people think that wealth taxation means we take all the wealth. No, the wealth taxation is going to be based on a percentage of how much wealth you accumulate. So for example, as you see in the chat section, I made it very simple. If you earn anywhere between $1 million, $5 million, you're taxed 2%. Now above 10 million, between $10 million and 20 million, 6%. So it's really based on last dollar earned, not entirely the entire amount. And we need to get that understood. We need to be very clear what it really entails, because a lot of people think that we're going to tax 5%. That means we're going to tax 5% of 1 million. It's not. It's really above. We have to look at the above and below at the same time, because I don't think we understand the number, the tax, how the tax system works. It's really basic. It's really basic common sense if people really take the time to understand it. Otherwise, we're just asking questions about, oh, if we should pay, if we accumulate more taxes, is this going to make us wealthier? No, we need to move the question is, we need to ask ourselves this question. Do we want to live in a society where people don't have food to eat? People can't get higher education, job training for new jobs of today and tomorrow, reducing crime rate. Because you look at other countries outside of DC, they've done pretty good investing people. So therefore their crime rate drops because of human needs. That's one thing we're not thinking about. We need to think about human needs in this discussion. If we don't focus on human needs, that means to focus on ourselves. That means we don't care about our neighbors, our friends. We need to go beyond that conversation. And this is what this tax, let me finish, please. This is what this tax is supposed to be about, human needs. If we focus too much on the money, how much we should keep to start a business, then that means we're not gonna get to the issue of solving the issues that society needs to solve itself. Otherwise, we're gonna be falling behind and behind for so many years. And this decade has so the last 40 years, this country has not made progress at all because of Reaganomics, not on the national level, but it's impacting DC with gentrification, high developments, pushing people out. Then you have to ask yourself, let me finish, please. Where are people
Mr. Pan,
how are they gonna get affordable housing?
Mr. Pan,
for more than 40 years, sir.
Excuse
Do your
me.
research. If you studied other countries
Mr.
outside
Pan.
America, like Africa,
Mr.
Japan,
Pan, Mr.
Taiwan,
Pan,
you
you.
would understand what I'm talking about. Instead, we're having discussion if we should increase the tax rates or not. It's a really not appropriate question to address. We need to think about the human needs. I understand businesses need to be creative, but we need to
Mr.
think about
Pan,
societal.
Excuse me, Mr. Pan, there's others that we want to hear from as well. I
I know,
appreciate,
but others are not understanding the big picture because we're
But
so
wait,
stuck in a
but
bubble. If we
I
had moved
appreciate-
beyond a bubble, excuse me, let me finish, please. If we were in a bubble, we wouldn't be asking this question if a wealth tax will work or not,
okay, thank
based
you.
on the data.
Thank you, Mr. Pan. Thank you for your comments and your passion on the subject, sir.
I'm just saying that we need to move beyond the bubble. We're being stuck in a bubble of the last 40 years.
Thank you. And we appreciate your comments. And we have some others that may want to give some comments as well, so we appreciate your comments, sir. So as we
Well-
continue with the discussion, we want to see of the ideas that you've heard, and some have resonated with folks. I see that in the chat, and many of the conversations from you out there have been things that some of the folks have responded to in the chat, and we appreciate that as well. But are there any other ideas that you heard during the conversation earlier, or some things that were presented during the presentation that resonated with people? We'd like to hear from some others. So we have a good bit of people in here tonight. And so I see Claire Goldberg, Kim Rubin, Andrew Shapiro, and others, if you have any comments. So we make sure we hear the voices of all the citizens that have come on tonight to engage in this dialogue. Anyone else?
Well, Ray, while people are thinking, I just thought I'd weigh in on a couple of things that have been asked or been said.
Thank you.
One, I think someone asked, do we already have a wealth tax? And we do. In fact, we have an estate tax here in the district. So when people pass away and pass on their estates, we do tax that. We exempt a lot of that wealth. I think our exemption level is about $4 million. It might be a little higher now. But so we do have an example of a wealth tax in the district. Wealth taxes can look a lot of different ways, as Nick said. There's lots of ideas out there. We heard as a commission from Dorothy Brown, who also had the idea of a wealth tax credit. So I think there's a lot of things we could take a look at and model for the district to think about how we raise the revenue we need to, as Michael said, invest in human needs, invest in people and communities across the district. I also just wanted to note on the idea of exempting the first sort of like $50,000 of income. I think you were referring to businesses. I think it's just important to remember that that will affect businesses with any level of income, right? Because we tax levels of income, not people, not businesses per se. So what I mean by that is that a business that brings in $1 million in revenue each year would then get exempted on its first $50,000 of revenue, just the same as a business that maybe earns $60,000 a year in revenue would get an exemption on that first $50,000. So the distribution of the benefits of that may not be exactly what you're thinking in terms of who's benefiting most. And it can be a little more costly than doing something that's more targeted like a credit, but it's certainly something we could take a look at.
Thank you, Eric.
For the person that weighed in about the biennial fees, I'm not sure, but I wonder if you're talking about the Clean Hands certification, which we heard a lot about from a lot of people in a lot of different rooms. So maybe if you have more to say about what fee you're talking about, we might have more answer to say about that.
Thank you, Erica. And we'll see if that person comes back. I'm managing and looking at the chat as well. And I think we have a question from Mr. Shapiro. Mr. Shapiro.
Hi, I'm the one that posted that question in the chat. Sorry, it's a little loud in my background. So the biennial fees are something that I guess every business pays every 2 years. It's a $200 or $300 fee, and I think a previous speaker brought it up. I own a small business. I do a lot of small business consulting. I've never gotten clarity on exactly what this fee goes for, but you have to pay it. I don't think it affects your clean hands, because it's not, I don't know if it's logged as a clean hand, something that would affect your clean hands, but it's definitely something you have to pay. But it remains, nobody really knows what it's there for. I did some work with Councilmember Pinto on the BEST Act, and I know that encompassed a lot of business license reform and the business license categories and changing those and what they cost. But that was not included in that. But that is just something I think every business has to pay every 2 years. But it's not really, there's not a lot of clarity around it and what it exists for. So that's, what I was asking about.
Yeah, the one I'm aware of is the $250 minimum tax on unincorporated business that Larry was talking about. I think that's an annual fee. So if it turns out you're thinking of something different, drop us a note via the website or send me an email or something so we can follow up on that.
So thank you for that, Nick. I want to see if there are any other questions. I don't see any in the chat at this time, and I'm looking through our scene to see if there's any other there. I want to ask one other question to the folks about engagement. One young lady asked in the chat, how can we continue to have these conversations with the community? And we want to know from you, how can the commission continue to engage the community to collect ideas and feedback on the DC tax system? So if you want to put your thoughts into the chat and let us know how that can happen, that would be greatly utilized so we can continue to hear from citizens throughout the city. I do think, and there's a comment from Mr. Pan in the chat, the commission needs to learn from other countries about raising enough revenues from big corporations and ultra wealthy issues about cash reparations for Black American descendants. And Mr. Shapiro has said a DC biennial report for corporations versus LLCs. And there's also a link that has been put in the chat about that. Ms. Goldberg says incentive-based surveys could be a good idea to promote them going online through digital ads. So yeah, that would be probably a way to get people to come to the meetings. We're looking for as many ideas as possible to get more information from the citizens about the DC tax system. Yeah, we start with conversations and we end with action, Mr. Pan. That's part of the process here. So we do appreciate your feedback. With that, I will pass it back to Nick for some parting comments. First, I'll say quickly about next steps. So you can visit the DC Tax Revision Commission.org as we stated. There are many materials, backgrounders on taxes, links to materials, hoping to educate everyone about what the taxes are utilized for and the myriad of ways that you can respond. You can sign up for notices about future events, as well as additional materials there, as well as upload your ideas and read what others are saying. We really want those ideas to be documented. And so please upload your ideas to the site. Nick?
Great. Thanks so much, Ray. Really appreciate your leadership in this conversation. And thanks so much to everybody for jumping on. It's very much the intention of the commission to use the commission process as an opportunity to really hear what folks are saying. And we've heard a lot this evening. And also to share information that we have, because we know there's a lot of questions. So I, just to underscore, encourage you to upload your thoughts and comment statements to the site. One of our speakers said they had already done that. Really appreciate that. Share this info with your friends, your neighbors, your networks. We will be having additional sessions like this and also in person over the course of this summer. We're going to start to home in on what the recommendations are going to be starting in September. So the rest of the spring and the summer is really the time for us to continue to listen and for you to share your perspective. So don't hold back. I think that's all I have for this evening. I hope everybody enjoys this lovely cool spring evening. Ray, anything else you want to say before we wrap up?
We just really appreciate that people came out to talk about DC taxes on this night, and we hope that you all will continue to upload your ideas. Thank you so much, and we appreciate your attendance. Have a good evening.